Welcome everybody to the next in our series of Lunch and Learns. I am so excited today that we have our head of cloud, Gonopolous, with us today to talk about cloud optimization, which is a really exciting part of the Araza business. So Con, I'm going to hand it straight over to you. Welcome and thanks for talking on the topic today.
Thanks, Victoria. Welcome everyone, and thanks for having me today. What I'll start off with is I'll briefly share the agenda that, sorry about that. So we'll be covering off the topic of cloud cost optimization. So that will cover three key parts to this agenda. One is what is cloud optimization to our approach to it and how we ultimately save money for clients, and lastly we'll talk about a case study with one of our current clients. So I suppose we'll start with cloud. What is cloud optimization? So before I dive into detail around what cost optimization is, cost optimization forms a part of a framework which is called the FinOps framework. FinOps is the term used to basically talk about cloud financial governance. So there's a whole industry and standards out there around how to best control and govern spend in cloud. One of the key components of FinOps is cloud optimization. What cloud optimization is in simple terms is that it's basically looking at how companies are consuming their cloud resources. So let's use AWS as the, in this case, as the example cloud platform that clients would use. Other ones are Azure or Google. But we'll just use AWS as the example here. So basically, cloud optimization is about improving the way clients use the services within AWS and cloud, and optimizing that spend by looking at performance and use of those resources. So basically, understanding if there are lowly utilized services, we can look at reducing that service to a smaller type service. I probably should also add here, for people who aren't aware of how, this is a quite important point, how cloud billing actually works. The fundamental change here around on-premise, where you buy a physical server and pay some money up front for it, cloud is consumed on an hourly basis. So you can literally buy a server or storage in cloud, use it for an hour, pay for that hourly cost, and then shut it down, and you're only charged for that hour. So that has fundamentally changed the financial model of infrastructure, going from a capital intensive where you pay up front for a server or storage, and you depreciate or amortize that across 4 or 5 years, to something where you'll basically pay as you go. So it's become vitally important that, since it's a pay-as-you-go model, so therefore you can stop stuff when you don't need it, or you can reduce the size of it. Obviously, cost optimization is a really strong, really important toolkit for clients or organizations to look at how they can rein in and control their cloud spend. So what we've done is we've developed our own internal framework. It's based on some of the standard frameworks out there that the FinOps guys have put together, or AWS or Azure, AWS well architected, or Azure, where there are certain standards that the industry is trying to implement and adhere to. What we've done at Araza is we've created our own version of this, which is quite, and is quite relevant to clients. So we've basically created our own internal tool set called the Arco product, which basically takes all key statistics, which covers spend performance, so CPU utilization, memory utilization, disk utilization, etc., etc. There's probably something like 60 or 70 performance metrics that we pick up for varying services. And where we take all this information and do some calculations around based on cost and spend, where we identify where it's the best spot or best possible spot to start looking at optimizing or changing the nature of that spend. So what we do is there's three key components to this. So one is we call inform. So the other one is called optimize, and the other one's called operate. So there's basically three phases that we go through. So the inform phase is around, let's get visibility, let's understand these metrics, let's understand where customers are leaking expenditure. The second one is around optimize. So this is, let's identify, those actions that we need to take. So, what do we need to do? Do we need to write what we call right size, which is basically, let's take this server, which is, size 8 extra large, and based on the usage and performance statistics and profile of that 8 extra large server, you could do the same thing with a 4 times extra large, so half the size. So based on performance stats, we can do some testing, and we can see that rather than paying for an 8 extra large, we can pay half the price for a 4 extra large. That is a simple example of how you would right size an EC2 or a virtual machine server. So we identify these key actions against each of the services based on performance and cost, and then we go into that delivery phase, which is that operate phase. So it's either working with our engineers who can have access to the client's environment. Now, a lot of the clients, especially would rather make the change themselves than us going into there. So we work with the platform engineering and delivery teams on the client side to ensure that these changes are enacted. So those are the three phases that generally we go through. I'll jump to the next agenda topic, which is the approach, though, where we've got a bit more. There's a few more steps that we go through. So what we normally do is there's three steps there, which is around, we do an assessment. So we do an assessment of the client's environment. So this is a high level, we produce a high level cloud fitness assessment for the client, where we talk about, hey, this is the potential size of optimization opportunities. Normally we've found, and we've done a few of these, we've found that, we probably normally find that opportunities range up to around 30 to 35% of their actual cost base. So it's quite high. And these opportunities are based on just some high level analysis around utilization and cost, etc. What we then do is we go into the implementation / more detailed phase, which is the second phase, which is we then go into a lot more detail around these opportunities. We also work with the client and the key teams in there to understand why they're using these services for what application, because there are some cases where, well, there's a lot of cases where there's a requirement to have certain services a certain size based on the software vendor's requirements or specifications, or certain our current client, one of our current clients, has a significant peak period, twice a year. So therefore, the size of some of these boxes are built to cater for some really significant peaks. So what we do is we try and understand the customer landscape, work with them to then merge the optimization opportunities that we identified, understand where we can go into and look at making the changes, and then we go into this implementation phase, where we are on a weekly basis, and basically this is the delivery component, where on a weekly basis we're meeting with all the key platform teams. We are constantly and constantly identifying and looking at what the opportunities are. And then we also are tracking where we're making the actual changes in their cloud environment. And then we're also tracking then obviously what we've actually saved the client. So there's basically an ongoing hands-on delivery process with the client and the key stakeholders week on week to continually track, update, and deliver these opportunities. And then obviously, and then every month we then provide significant and quite a bit of detail around executive reporting, given that given that cloud platform costs in some of these major corporates represent a very large percentage of the cost. So therefore, executives are extremely interested in how the cost optimization program is running. And I'll jump into the last agenda item, which is a case study. So one of our biggest clients is Tabcorp, where we've been running a cost optimization program now for 13 months there. And basically what I just described, we've been through with them and we're going through at the moment. We initially identified that we could save them, the sort of high level, size of the prize was around 35%. We then started working through with some of the key engineering teams. So there's 4 key engineering teams that we work with in there on a weekly basis, where we refined and then ultimately, enacted some of these savings opportunities. And we're currently 13 months in, we're currently sitting with realized annualized savings against their cost of approximately 17%, with another 12% of other opportunities that we are working on. So we just don't stop at a certain number of opportunities. We just continue going on and continually identify new opportunities. So ultimately, after probably 18 months or so at Tabcorp, we will have hit around 27-28% savings of their cost base, which is enormous. Tabcorp's really happy with how the program's running. Basically we're replicating that across multiple sites now. We've just kicked off a big one in another large client. So the formula seems to be working well. We're able to, given our IP around the creation of our ARCO calcs and product, that we can produce and provide really accurate recommendations. And then we can work with clients. Our whole framework of working with them on a weekly basis is working really well. We're able to enact some significant savings. Victoria, that's probably the end of the presentation.
Yeah, fantastic, Con. And I think just to follow up on a few things. One, if you raise your hand, I can unmic you guys and you can ask your questions of Con. But one of the things I think we really, maybe, I don't want to say butted heads with, but I think one of the more interesting things is people always assume that this is an architecture, or this is a cloud architecture issue. And it really isn't. It's one of our things is that we have to continually talk to our clients about FinOps in a cloud optimization, right? This is a FinOps issue. I mean, yes, there's process, and yes, there's cloud cleanup there. But the reason there's so much value to be won in this area is because it isn't how you architect for an environment. They're doing the best thing that they can build for their organization, and we're coming in with a FinOps lens. I think we're really learning how to work with clients around that.
What's happening there is, and you're spot on. I mean, the advent of cloud basically has created this whole thing, and the reason and its advantage of why it's there is speed of delivery, the speed in which you can provision infrastructure to allow for software development is astounding compared to how it used to be with on-prem. So therefore, developers and engineers are expected to go as quickly as possible And it's very hard for them to then sit back and go, hang on, have I overspec'd, or is something running that shouldn't be? So, they're not doing anything wrong. It's just that organizations probably haven't realized that they need to invest in this FinOps type cost optimization framework.
And I do think your example at the beginning was a little bit funny. And what engineer or quality engineer tester has ever said, "Oh, I need cloud for 1 hour," and then shut it off?
Yes. So the theory, you're right. They turn it on and forget to shut it off 3 years later. That's what normally happens. But the theory is that's what cloud's there for. So you don't have to keep stuff on when you don't need it. And if you do, so people talk about, oh, let's move to cloud, it's cheaper. It's actually more expensive than on-prem if you kept everything on all the time, right? But the whole notion of it is it's pay as you go. So therefore, you turn it on when you actually need it, and then that makes it a lot more efficient. But yes, it doesn't happen in reality. That's why we have this. Service.
Doug, I'm giving you your microphone. Give me 2 seconds. There you go. Oh, hold
He's
on.
on.
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me, Con?
Hi, Doug. How are
Good. Thanks for that. My question was, from your experience now, you've gone through a few client engagements with this capability. What would you say are the top barriers or challenges that you've seen when engaging with this capability with clients, and how you got around that, or how you resolved that?
Look, the biggest challenge is there's a couple of challenges, and there are different points, right? One is a big challenge of how do you break into a client, right? And how do a client accept that they actually need this help? So what we found in Victoria, and I found this quite a bit, is that talking to the right audience, right, who are impacted more because of financial overruns. So talking to a head of cloud or an engineering person is probably not the right target, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not their fault. They're not remunerated on keeping spend within budget. They're remunerated on delivery. So therefore, their care factor on this type of service is a lot lower than a head of finance, a GM of finance, a CFO, or a CIO. So we found that there's a barrier there to a degree in terms of entry, where depending on person's role and what's important to them with everything, right? This is anyway, general statement is that what's important to them is then they'll determine whether they're interested in our offering. So obviously someone who's remunerated on keeping their costs within budget will be more receptive to our offering. The other barrier that we found once you're in an organization, and we're pretty much finding that with all of them, is that initial breaking through with the engineers, right? So we need their help when we're doing this work, right? We need them to help us with understanding the applications that they're owning or running. They normally also have some extra business volume stats through some of their sort of monitoring or logging tools that we would like access to. And also they're the ones then that we need to also help with making the actual change if we identify that something's unoptimized. So yes, initially we have found that a lot of these guys normally seem to be too busy and not that interested. What we have found though to get around that is we provide a very easy and simple to consume analysis for their very specific area. So we don't generalize. We do all the analysis. We don't ask them to do any of it. So it's it makes it a lot easier for them to consume when you turn around and go, hey man, this is your biggest app. They're like, yep, that's the one that I own. Hey, look, you've got these 10 instances in here. Man, you haven't gone over 5% utilization in CPU or memory in 6 months. We think that you could go from here to here. That would show a saving of $750,000 per annum if we made this change. Now, all of a sudden, we've done all that analytics for them, right? And and then they can. It's all they have to think about is, hey, when can I make this change? Rather than why. And then they know also the way that we report it. So we report by team, by division. So therefore, they know that then, you know, that report of, yep, we enact that change as $750,000 that is associated to a saving to their team, right? And that is then recognition of their efforts. And once that happens, we always see momentum building. So there's momentum. You've got to get this momentum building, and then all of a sudden it turns around. The coin flips to the engineering people or the testing people coming to us with ideas and further recommendations, which literally happens everywhere. So it's basically about providing some concise, specific data that's relative to them, related to them, their environment. It show them that then that will be highlighted as a win for their team, and then you build momentum and you keep at it. Like, this is a weekly process, week in, week out. You know, at Tabcorp, we're there for 13 months, so we've spent more than 50 weeks meeting with them every time, every week, you know, for multiple teams. So it's building that relationship and continuing that momentum.
That's great. Thanks, Gon.
No worries.
Thanks, Doug. And I think, you know, you also hit on something, Con, there with talking about the tools they're using. So a lot of our clients have invested. So some are using the native AWS or Azure
Cost Explorers.
Yeah, the reporting, but some are buying tools as well, and they're still not getting full advantage of that. So how are we helping them on that?
Yeah. And this is, you know, you basically hit on the head. Our service, this service that we're literally doing, is born out of that issue. You know, I've built and tried to sell cost optimization software, and whilst it's all good stuff out there, at the end of the day, if it's not implemented properly and if it's not used properly, no one's going to get any value out of it. So that's where we've gone, hang on, let's put a wrapping of service and a framework and a process around using these tools, though. So it is a technology-led service, but there's a process around it. So what we're finding is, for instance, there's by far the market leader in FinOps cloud financial reporting is Cloudability, right? Every single client has it that we go to. But most of them aren't using it to anywhere to the degree of, you know, to get the value out of it, because it hasn't been set up properly. The other thing too is there's a lot of hygiene that you need to clean up around how you tag assets. So if you don't know what an asset is related to, how can you report on, you know, if you don't know what division it sits in, what environment it relates to, what application it relates to, how do you know what to do with it, right? So there's all this hygiene stuff that we call it, which is part of the FinOps frameworks of, you know, cleaning up the data, investing time in you know, identifying these assets better, and that's when then you can truly use the power of these tools.
That's right. Yep. Any other questions for Con before we wrap up today? No hands? It was a good overview. We're really excited because we have another lunch and learn coming up with Con, where we actually talk specifically about FinOps and you know, this overall FinOps and what it means and what is everyone talking about. So Con, thank you so much for coming on today. We know you're super busy. And thanks to everyone for joining. You're getting a lot of applause right now, so well done, Con. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for coming on.
There, guys. Hope you have a good day. Bye.
Bye.